world, a Star Wars show, and I'm your host, Jon Justice. I am glad that you have decided to spend some time with me, whether you are listening on whatever platform you listen to your podcast on, or you are watching on YouTube. Thank you so much for checking the show out this week. I really do appreciate it. So before I get into episode 4 of the Book of Boba Fett, might be my favorite episode so far, let's get into a bit of news here. From Radio Times, the actress who plays Fennec Shand spoke to Radio Times talking about the season finale. And the article from Radio Times goes something like this. The Book of Boba Fett star, Ming-Na Wen, has teased the spin-off's upcoming finale, saying that fans will see the whole show in doing that thing with my fingers a different light when we get to the season finale, and it arrives on Disney+. Wen told Radio Times in an exclusive interview, I really hope that they want to go back and see the whole thing over again in a different light after, how things have, I'm so careful to choose my words here, how things have evolved and all these other elements that have come into play. That's what's great. That's what's so great with producers Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni. They are so knowledgeable about this world, about Star Wars. They're such huge fans that they know how to set up the pieces and make moves you don't even know are coming. Now, she continued and said, and suddenly it's like, clasps her hands together, oh, checkmate. So, yeah, we're waiting. We're waiting for that win. We're waiting for that hit. And it's not just till the very last episode. Like each and every episode, there's new moves and new elements that come into play that hopefully will surprise fans. I know it surprised me, she went on to say. Of course, the series, which premiered on Disney Plus on December 29th, consists of 7 episodes, and the finale is set to air on February 9th. So, the first question I have with regard to her comments is, I assume that was a recent interview, and so you never know, with these interviews, how long ago they were done. Is this something that she was referencing in response to some of the criticism, as we talked about on last week's show, to the Book of Boba Fett so far? Or was this recorded, or was this interview conducted prior to, the most recent episodes? I mean, this, what she's saying could have just been implying the fact that maybe it was only past season or episode 1 or chapter 1 of the Book of Boba Fett. In which case, if she's implying about the arc of Boba Fett potentially, right, it could play into that. You could also, as I mentioned, if this was a recent interview and she was actually responding to some of the divisions within the fandom over how the show's played out so far, then perhaps she is talking about something grander happening at the end of the episode. It does raise the question for me about sort of the commentary around the show so far. Robert Rodriguez, who is working extensively on the show, directed 3 episodes. Jon Favreau writing it, who wrote the Mandalorian. And, he had said early on that all the trailers we were watching were only the first 15 minutes of the first episode, and it wasn't true. Now that we've gotten through chapter 4, I'm trying to say chapter. Apparently there was an interview that was done, or a comment that was made from somebody on the production team, in response to a commentary around the show and calling them episodes and not chapter. And they do call these chapters, and that if we're going to pay respect to the creators of the show, we should be calling them chapters. So I'm trying to call them chapters because technically they're chapters in the Book of Boba Fett, and that makes sense, right? So Robert Rodriguez, had made that comment about, only the first 15 minutes of the first episode, and it wasn't until we got to this week's chapter 4 that now we've seen all the footage so far. Okay, we've seen all the footage so far from the trailers. So everything now for episodes 5, 6, and 7 for the next 3 episodes, we haven't seen any footage of. So what does that mean? I don't know. I really feel like the leak game when it comes to the Book of Boba Fett has been completely off. Unless some things come true in these last 3 episodes, a lot of what people had leaked going into the show just hasn't happened yet. a lot of people were saying that this was going to be, Mandalorian season 2.1. And that hasn't been the case at all. This has been all Boba Fett. A lot of people were saying that Han Solo and Luke Skywalker would appear in the Book of Boba Fett. And so far, it doesn't really seem like it's setting up for any of that. Grogu was rumored to be in this. Again, so far, it doesn't seem like we're setting up towards that. Now, there are some setups in Chapter 4, and we'll get to that. We'll get to that coming up in just a little bit. So, going back and putting a bow on the comments from Ming-Na Wen. I know a lot of people did take it, as I mentioned, as response to the criticism. Hey, wait until the season finale. But again, I really don't see it that way. There are a lot of people that have been enjoying the show. There has been some criticism of it. It hasn't been as good as The Mandalorian, in my opinion. And I imagine they are building towards something big. And that was kind of set up in this latest episode when they talk about going to war with the Pikes, and the tease at the very end of the episode. If you weren't listening closely, you may have missed it. Plus, I have another bit of leaked information to share with you as well, and we'll see how much this comes true. So there is something to say that they could be setting up for a rather big final 3 episodes, and I hope they are. I've been enjoying the Book of Boba Fett. It's been, as I've said, over the course of the past 3 weeks, it's been rather hit or miss for me. Really enjoyed this most recent episode, and I'll give you my reasons why coming up. And I hope that is the case. I hope that when we get done with the entire season, that we start to get a little bit more perspective on what it was they were trying to accomplish. I think that I'm personally beginning to see it. Especially with Chapter 4 this week, it seems very clear to me that a big part of this show in the first half of this season was about this change in Boba Fett and how the Tusken Raiders changed him and how he didn't want to be a bounty hunter anymore. He says that directly to Black Krrsantan. He says, be careful when you're being a bounty hunter, you're going to get used. I'm essentially, I don't have the exact words of what he said, but that's essentially what he said. It's like, dude, be careful who you're working for when you're going to be a bounty hunter. He said to Fennec Shand in this episode, he didn't want to be a bounty hunter anymore. I do believe, as I've mentioned, that this is largely due to the fact that what they did with The Mandalorian is what they probably would have done with Boba Fett if they hadn't created The Mandalorian. So they needed to give Boba Fett a different arc, take him to a different place. There was a subsequent interview with the same actress who also said that we're going to see Boba Fett, kick some butt before we get, to the end of the season. And as I said extensively last week, I really do hope that is the case, because I just feel like that Boba Fett we were introduced to in The Mandalorian Season 2, that's post his time with the Tusken Raiders, doesn't necessarily match the Boba Fett that we were seeing in the book of Boba Fett. That being said, I think this particular episode changed that a bit as I get into some of the things that I really liked about this week's chapter. Sorry, I keep saying episode. This week's chapter. One more bit of leaked news out there that I personally hope comes true, just because I love my Star Wars vehicles. Bespin Bulletin was reporting this week that apparently the Mandalorian, Din Djarin, his next ship is an N1 Naboo starfighter from the prequels. They expanded on that and said they don't know the rationale behind why that is. Obviously, he doesn't have the Razor Crest anymore. He needs another vehicle to get around. Perhaps it's a temporary vehicle. I can't see the Mandalorian using a Naboo starfighter as his permanent vehicle, even though he doesn't have Grogu now. But that being said, there could be another reason why until he gets a new vehicle. I'm assuming he's going to be given, or they're going to give him something as a replacement for the Razor Crest, something on par to a ship that size, unless they do just end up going with a Naboo starfighter. I'd like to see an N1 Naboo starfighter that actually was painted a different color. I'd like to have that established within the universe, that they're not all just yellow, even though that's all we saw in The Phantom Menace and in Attack of the Clones. I don't think we saw any Naboo starfighters in Revenge of the Sith. Really enjoyed that vehicle. Doug Chiang designed that. He's kind of become the new Ralph McQuarrie since Ralph McQuarrie's passing, and has done a fantastic job designing a multitude of ships, vehicles, and artwork for all of the Star Wars projects since the prequels. And that Naboo starfighter was supposed to be very representative of a different age than what we'd seen in the in the original trilogy, right? More of a golden age and something more akin and leaning towards the High Republic. So we'll see. So maybe we could see the Mandalorian, as we'll get into in the spoiler at the end of not a spoiler, but at the tease at the end of this week's chapter 4. Maybe we'll see the Mandalorian arrive in the Book of Boba Fett in an N1 Naboo starfighter. I think that would be pretty awesome. So let's get into this week's episode, chapter 4. And again, I really enjoyed this episode quite a bit. I've only had a chance to watch it once. This is the first episode that I am genuinely looking forward to going and watching again. Right from the onset of the episode, we did get the final connection to the Mandalorian in Boba Fett finding Fennec Shand in the desert on Tatooine after being shot by Calacan in that season 1 episode of The Mandalorian. Loved seeing the different angle of Boba Fett, seeing them firing the flares from the speeders as they were trying to go after Fennec Shand. I thought that was awesome. And then we got to what I was really pleased to see, based off of one of the criticisms that so many people had, and I had as well, from Chapter 3, and that was we got to see more of the modified teenagers and their colorful Vespas. As I mentioned last week, I wanted to see some establishing of this culture on Tatooine. We do have a Coruscant-style club on Tatooine that we've been to several times over the course of these 4 episodes. This is the club where Jennifer Beals, who plays the Twi'lek that she runs. And if you really look around at the design and the style of that club, it does have kind of a Coruscant and even Canto Bight vibe to it. There is a little bit of elegance there, and a little bit more color. It's a little bit more vibrant than what we've seen before. And the fact that we go to this teenage modification shop where they're doing their body mods, and we see more of those Vespa-style scooters, I was like, all right, cool. So we are establishing that there is this subculture on Tatooine. I would love to see, they don't have to, but I would really love to see them tie it into or make a comment about Coruscant and the desire to be more like that, because I do think that these characters would fit perfectly on Coruscant or even on Canto Bight. I enjoyed the modification angle, seeing how Fennec Shand was saved. This fits right in with Star Wars when you look at Luke getting his hand chopped off, when you look at Grievous, when you look at Darth Vader. If I had any criticism in terms of the connections being made, which I very much like to see, and I think they're doing a good job of that, the only criticism that I would have is there still seems to be a bit of a design continuity. It's almost a little too bright. And again, I think it's more because it's being set on Tatooine. If this was on Coruscant, if you go back and watch Attack of the Clones, and especially those opening sequences on Coruscant when they go into the bar, into the club, those kids could be there as background characters, and you wouldn't think twice about it. On Tatooine, because of what we know of Tatooine, they do kind of stick out. But I'm really, really happy that they made those connections. I think it works better now. We see a little bit more context, and to what the actress said in the interview. Now I'm looking at that gang in Chapter 3 in a different light. I did go back and watch Chapter 3. It didn't make the Vespa. It didn't make the chase through Tatooine any better. That still was a wonky as all get out chase. And there's something weird. I don't know if you've noticed this or not, but there's something weird in the episodes where there's a couple of shots where the action gets really choppy. Like, it's not smooth. It's absolutely noticeable during the Vespa, mod kids chase sequence with the mayor's assistant. It's kind of skittish. there's a point in this most recent episode, Chapter 4, when Boba Fett gets back on Slave One, and he's climbing up into the ship, and there's a moment there when it gets choppy. I even thought it was my TV. I went and pulled it up on my iPad and my computer just to make sure that it didn't have anything to do with the resolution on my television. And no, those shots, the way that they're filmed, there's something weird going on with like the film rate or something. It's a minor complaint. It just I get very, technical when it comes to that kind of stuff. All right, to the episode itself. Loved the Slave One escape from Jabba's palace. Thought it was really cool to see where Slave One had been parked this whole time. The attack on the Nikto I thought was fantastic. I was watching it with my wife Melinda and my 15-year-old Kyle, and we all were laughing just because the Niktos are blasting across the Tatooine, the Dune Sea on their speeders, having no idea that Slave One is creeping up behind him, and then Boba just lays waste to him. Just absolutely fantastic. Really enjoyed them going to the Sarlacc. I thought it was a weird move to bring Slave One down that close to the Sarlacc pit, because I think we all knew watching it was still going to be alive, right? I mean, you don't put the ship in that position over the hole and then to not have the beat come out and attack him. But it made for a really fun sequence. The only question that I have, and I've heard another podcast talk about this, and I guess I can understand the rationale, but why did he think his armor was in the Sarlacc pit? He climbed out of it with it on. Now, I guess the assumption is that he was so messed up from beginning to be, from beginning to being digested for 1,000 years, that maybe he was loopy and didn't realize that he busted out of the Sarlacc pit and through the sand with his armor on. It was stripped from him very early outside of the Sarlacc pit, so perhaps that's why. I just thought it was weird. I was like, why does he think the armor is there? But at the same time, I also thought that the dropping of the seismic charge and the goofy one-liner from Fennec Shand was fantastic. Right? I thought that was great, and that's what I wanted. That's what I was expecting, and I was thrilled with it. So just, again, a lot of really great fun sequences in this particular episode. I love the setup to the Pike War. I like where we're going with this. I think this is going to potentially make for a really big finale, as it looks as if Boba Fett is trying to bring in a group to take on the Pikes. I thought the bringing of the clans, the tribes, the regions together to Jabba's palace, and for as little as it was, seeing their ships parked outside Jabba's palace, and then when the meeting was over, seeing their ships depart, I don't know, it added a very sort of grounded and realism feel to it. Like you were watching, again, like a gangster film or TV show, and you see them arrive in their vehicles and leave in their vehicles. I just thought that was a cool decision to include that element in that particular scene. So we're setting up to bring in some cameos at the end of this, at these last 3 episodes. And if you missed it, when Fennec and Boba were talking about, hey, who do we bring in for this? They played the music for The Mandalorian. So, I think that was pretty much a straight up sort of, hey, he's going to try to recruit the Mandalorian, which is why I mentioned that the Bespin Bulletin leak rumor was that the Mandalorian would have a Naboo starfighter for his ship, and so I hope that's the case for another reason. It plays into what I've been talking about with the prequel elements that they've shown in the Book of Boba Fett. So to see an N1 starfighter there, if it potentially happens to be near the mod kids' speeders, I mean, that all really, fits in with the aesthetic, and I could really, really get into that. So what did you think of this most recent episode? What have you thought about all 4? I'm sorry, I keep saying episode, don't I? Sorry. I'm going to charge myself $1. No, what did you think of this chapter? Did you enjoy it as much as I did? Have you been enjoying the Book of Boba Fett? And I'd love to hear from you. TalkShowNerd at gmail.com. Again, TalkShowNerd at gmail.com. Or if you're watching on YouTube, you can always leave a comment on YouTube, and I'll pull your comment from there as well. All right, let's switch over to a little bit of news, and then one more item I want to talk about before we dive into listener feedback this week.
This is not going to go the way you think.
So on Twitter this week, and I don't know how exactly the question came up, but Pablo Hidalgo, who is a part of the story group, very active on Twitter for Lucasfilm, he revealed that Bad Robot, and this would be J.J. Abrams' production company that he partnered with Disney to make The Force Awakens and the Rise of Skywalker, that J.J. initially wanted to destroy Coruscant in The Force Awakens, but Lucasfilm disagreed, leading to the creation of Hosnian Prime as a compromise. Now, I remember going back to 2015 and 2016, prior to all the controversy after The Last Jedi came out, that there was a lot of talk about what was with Hosnian Prime? Why didn't they just blow up Coruscant? And it was rationalized by saying that the Republic and its location would shift as time went on. So it was in Coruscant for a while, but then it ended up being on Hosnian Prime. I can't take credit for this, but somebody on the Star Wars Leaks Reddit page posted this in response to Pablo revealing that JJ originally wanted to destroy Coruscant versus Hosnian Prime. My instinctive reaction to that was like, bummer, because I think the destruction of Coruscant in The Force Awakens by the First Order would have definitely bridged in the sequels to would have bridged the sequels to the prequels. We would have immediately established what it was that the First Order was trying to do. They spelled it out in the movie, saying that they were destroying the Republic, right, by destroying Hosnian Prime, but you're watching it without the context of the leadership moving around from system to system, and you were kind of like, why wasn't it Coruscant? Why is it now Hosnian Prime? So in that sense, I wish that they would have gone with Coruscant. However, as somebody posted on Reddit, I wanted to share this with you. They say there's two ways to read this. One, it's a mark against the idea that JJ was not willing to take risks in the sequel trilogy. Or two, given that this was for The Force Awakens and still a peak prequel trilogy hate times for Star Wars, it would have been a middle finger at the prequel trilogy by blowing up the equivalent of the Millennium Falcon, the most used setting of those films. So, I don't really go with the number two idea. I know that there was talk going around that JJ wanted to put the skeletons of Jar Jar Binks on Jakku. I don't know if there was any truth to that rumor whatsoever, but there was also the opening line of the film itself. This will begin to make things right when Lor Santeca hands over the portion of the map to Luke Skywalker to Poe Dameron. Okay, and there were people saying that was a direct nod to JJ saying, the sequel, The Force Awakens, will begin to make things right in the Star Wars fandom. And then, of course, you get to The Force Awakens, and you get to The Rise of Skywalker, and you get the line of Luke saying, a Jedi should have more respect for his lightsaber, which people took as a dig at what Rian Johnson did. To me, that's a lot of fandom injecting their idea of what J.J. Abrams was thinking. And without J.J. being asked the question, I have a hard time believing that J.J. would want to go out of his way after getting paid millions upon millions of dollars and having, a part of his reputation at stake in creating the first Star Wars movie in 10 plus years to try to revive the theatrical experience for Star Wars, that he would be going out of his way to try to take digs at the prequel trilogy. So, in my mind, I think that, this is more indicative that JJ was going for something bold here. He genuinely wanted to destroy Coruscant because he wanted to make the First Order seem threatening. And to me, that seems like the most relevant answer to the question. So, again, I can understand why Disney decided not to. you destroy Coruscant now, you can't go and visit it later, and what if they want to do something with it down the road? So that makes some sense. So the compromise is, okay, let's come up with a plot device where the Republic moves around, we'll put it in a different place that nobody's heard of before, that doesn't have any existence within the canon, and we can blow it up and still accomplish what JJ wanted. That seems like the most logical answer to me. That being said, I still would have really liked to have seen Coruscant being blown up. Not because I didn't like Coruscant, but because I really think that connection to the prequel trilogy would have been well received. And I think not that The Force Awakens needed any help, but I would have liked to have seen a little bit more of that. I thought that the Canto Bight sequence, having watched The Last Jedi again just recently, I enjoyed that sequence more and more. I still don't understand when people complain about The Last Jedi and John Boyega not having a role in that movie. He has a huge role in that film, but I've talked about that ad nauseum on other shows before. But I thought, Canto Bight, I think, does fit well in with the sequels and is a nod back to the prequels because I think that fits well with the aesthetic of what we saw in Coruscant. And now, even with the Book of Boba Fett, while I was hesitant and don't necessarily like the look of the Vespa speeders, I think the big handlebars and the mirrors are a little bit too much. The paint schemes don't bother me nearly as much as they did before. But I do like the fact that we do have, again, some nods to visuals that we've seen in the past that kind of bridge the gap without being too direct about it, right? I just want to see that. I want to see that N1 Naboo starfighter in The Mandalorian. I just think seeing The Mandalorian get out of a Naboo starfighter, just inject that right into my veins. Just take it and just put it right in there, because that would be right. Because I love this ship. I think I have. If you're not watching on YouTube, you have no idea but I'm playing with a Hot Wheel Naboo starfighter right now in my hand, and I'm making it fly around because that's the kind of host that I want to be. One that you don't take very seriously.
I need someone to show me my place in all this.
All right, let's dive into some listener feedback. Irene Davis from the UK has a lot to say, so let's get into it. So, John, the last book of Boba Fett left me what's going on vibes. You are very articulate and have put what I was unable to articulate into words. As always, I enjoy your show because I have a Disney subscription. I will keep plodding on. I just don't know. As said before, I'm flat. The spark is not there. I hope it does not go out, as Leia would say. I think it's a disappointment at the way it's going at the risk of repeating myself. I cannot be bothered to get a rise out of the stupidity that passes for Star Wars content on YouTube by the same set of YouTubers. There's a guy on there that has millions of followers and is completely stuck in the past on a Vader fixation. Sorry, just don't get it. Almost as though you need a PhD to outdo each other with contests that is filler and drivel. Unhealthy brainwashing, if you asked me. Again, that is why I enjoy your show. Good, honest content. Thank you. Good, honest observation and a willingness to move forward. I think it stems that so many people see George Lucas as God, and Filoni and Favreau is the same. They're not. They're artists. Many excellent creators are out there and need to be given chances, like the director of The Last Jedi, Rian Johnson. Otherwise, it will become stale. She went on to say, in another email, I had some time to reflect on my comment, perhaps why I feel so disengaged and flat, and this is my conclusion. Your channel is something that I have consistently listened to for 3 years. I value your commentary, your hard work, and your love of Star Wars, and your honesty, and your willingness to repeatedly say that art is subjective, because it is, and thus leaving room for everyone's interpretation and inclusiveness, regardless of what you may think in private. I am serious and not wrying this glibly. So, the point I'm trying to make is that as a lifelong Star Wars fan from its humble beginnings, quelling in the street at the first movie, or queuing in the street at the first movie to the same excitement building as The Force Awakens was announced, and so many years later, the same excitement that time that time had not diminished. Came out the old Luke and Chewie and Leia and Darth, etc. figures, and this time playing with my granddaughter. Then I looked at social media, and what started as a quiet concern turned into full-scale, nauseating alarm at the cruelty and cauldron of social media. It culminated into complete horror at the ease of which death threats and bullying of John Boyega and Kelly Marie Tran, etc., and knowing the worst of the worst behavior got the most clicks. Slowly but surely, though, it seems to be working back. As recently I watched The Rise of Skywalker, and again, I didn't have that sadness in the pit of my stomach and was able to enjoy Star Wars again. So I will choose to save what I love. Thank you, Irene. Fantastic words and comments. Totally agree, and just really glad that you enjoyed the show. It means a lot to me. All right, friend of the show, Miranda Alicia, says this. Want to hear something weird, John? I actually didn't know there was any controversy going on. It's the Star Wars fan base being the Star Wars fan base for one reason or another. Some will have good reasons and some not so good reasons to complain. It's just something to expect forward from this point. Very sad, but sometimes entertaining and fascinating. I agree. Thank you, friend of the show. Disney Desi. Thanks for writing in Disney Desi. Also, Disney Desi. I got to get to Disneyland, man. This is the longest I've ever been in my entire lifetime from not having gone to Disneyland, and it makes me sad. I used to go every single year. And when I had an annual pass, I went like a couple times a week, and I haven't been in over 5 years. This is the longest time period in my entire life of being alive that I haven't been to Disneyland, because I was going as a kid. Makes sense, right? Okay. Anyways, Disney Desi writes this. I love having a weekly show, Boba Fett, as opposed to just binge watching all at once. A huge part of my enjoyment in watching is tuning in to hear what you and other vloggers thought each week, coming up with theories, etc. I miss having that experience with shows like Cobra Kai, Stranger Things on Netflix. Yeah, and I tend to agree, Disney Desi, and I do. I made that comment early on about the Book of Boba Fett, just saying that perhaps this particular show would have lent itself better to having it being released at once, just because of the response that it's had so far with the fandom. But I tend to agree. I think it's better that they do it the way that they're doing it. It looks like it's not changing anytime soon, and they know that it gives a chance for all these channels to talk about a show and pump up the next episode week after week after week. It really does fuel the fandom. I don't know what the fandom would do if if they put out an entire season of live action or animated Star Wars content on Disney+. A lot of shows will probably break it down week by week anyways. That being said, I heard Christian Harloff on the Sith Council talking about this past week's chapter, keep saying episode again, and he made a comment that I disagree with. He said that Star Wars works better on TV, and I disagree with that. I think it works well on TV, but honestly, I think it works best on the big screen. And my rationale for that comes from watching The Last Jedi this past week and just the different experience that I get even watching on my 65-inch TV than I do watching The Mandalorian or The Book of Boba Fett. I know that they're different shows or TV shows versus movies, but just the epic scale and the way that movies are crafted, there's just something magical about them. And there's something magical about Disney and Lucasfilm and Star Wars films specifically when it comes to the theatrical experience that translates even when you're watching at home in a way that, live action content doesn't. Live action content's good and these special effects are great, but on live action shows, you have a chance to flesh it out more. And until we get a show that's more like Game of Thrones, because to me, Game of Thrones is one of the best examples of the blending of the cinematic experience and the TV experience, where you do get a fleshed out tale over a longer series of episodes and seasons, but each episode still has a really epic feel to it. We still haven't seen that yet in Star Wars, and I hope we see it. I hope we see it soon. Last email comes from James Decker, and he just writes, "Love your books." Thank you, James. I appreciate that, and it gives me an opportunity to talk about my EMBARK science fiction space opera series. You can get the EMBARK trilogy box set, featuring the first 3 books in the 2021 Tail Flick Discovery Sci-Fi Award-winning series. That's right, my series won an award. It was last year's Tail Flick Discovery Sci-Fi Award, and I won it. And so now I can say that my series is a 2021 Tale Flick Discovery Sci-Fi Award winner. So the trilogy box set is the first 3 books, which does tell an entire story, even though it continues on after that. Book 1, Book 2, Treasure in Darkness and the Vanishing War, Book 3. It's available for $3.99. All the other ebooks are available for $2.99, and you can also get them in paperback, hardback, and audiobook as well. I'm currently in the process of editing the Book 6 audiobook, which will be out very soon, and finishing writing Book 7, which I hope to have out in the next 2 months. For those new listeners or watchers and are going, you write sci-fi books, what are they about? Book 1 is about this. It is an epic space opera, right? Good versus evil, great for all ages, starting from 11 years old all the way up to 80 or 90. Again, think Star Wars in terms of violence and action. But the book blurb for Book 1 goes as follows. Keitha Morrow dreamed of visiting the newly discovered distant worlds. Now it's a matter of survival. When Keitha uncovers a cryptic message left behind by her late aerospace engineer father with the help of fellow pilot Taft Guardia, she makes a shocking discovery. Her excitement quickly turns to fear when an industrial accident inside the largest civilian and military spacecraft factory sets off a catastrophic chain of events. As war erupts during the global evacuation, Keitha realizes the significance of what she's found, and so does the enemy. Interstellar travel isn't what she imagined, as she and Taft are being hunted for the power in their possession. While Earth's evacuees stand upon the brink of annihilation, Keitha faces her destiny and might be humanity's greatest hope for survival among the stars. Go to mynerdworld.net. You can click the link in the notes on the podcast, or if you go to my page on YouTube, there's a link to the Amazon page right there on the corner of the top banner. You can go to Amazon, search for EMBARK, Jon Justice, and find all 6 books in the series there. If you want to support My Nerd World in the podcast, that's how you do it. I'd really appreciate you going picking up your preferred copy in, again, ebook, paperback, hardcover, or audiobook. And a great deal with that, the EMBARK Trilogy box set, those first 3 books, which does tell a complete story, available for just $3.99, which is a big discount from the individual price of $2.99 each for the first 3 books. So again, Amazon.com, and search for EMBARK, Jon Justice. And that wraps up the show this week. Thank you so much for checking it out. I really do appreciate it. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did recording it. And we'll talk to you again next week as we review Chapter 5, right, in the Book of Boba Fett. So until then, have yourself a great week, and I hope wherever you are happy, you are healthy, and you are safe. Bye.
The Force will be with you, always.
My Nerd World.